Welcome once again to Planet Normal, the Telegraph podcast with Alison Pearson
Hello.
and me, Liam Halligan. Britain's acquiring a bad reputation for hounding its leaders out of power in rapid succession in a petulant fashion, lurching from one set of policies to another with no economic or political compass. So writes our distinguished colleague Ambrose Evans-Pritchard in Wednesday's Telegraph, link in the show notes. The destructive falls of Westminster are needlessly pushing Britain towards a guilt crisis, a sterling crisis, says Ambrose. And how right he is. Starmer's on the ropes, Alison. This is surely now the end game. The Prime Minister, I suggest, is unlikely to make it to the end of 2027 as Labour leader and Prime Minister, let alone to 2029, the scheduled end of this Parliament. Even if he does stay, the only way that could happen is if he forms a Faustian pact with the mass ranks of hard-left Labour MPs, led by rabble-rouser-in-chief Angela Rayner, along with the Labour activists whose champion is Ed Miliband. As Ambrose points out, and as we've been saying for many months on Planet Normal, Alison, led as we are by your unsurpassed economic nous, the UK government's paying an awful lot to borrow, with the big global investors who lend governments serious money pushing up sovereign bond yields. We're paying more than France and Italy, more than any other G7 economy, more than Greece or Spain, more than Morocco to borrow, as Britain's debt interest bill, already more than £100 billion, spirals up ever more. All of those payments are money, of course, which are diverted from government's coffers away from the schools, hospitals, and the other things that taxpayers really pay tax for. Across the other side of the world in Japan, there's also the chance of more financial fireworks in the aftermath of a stunning election victory for the incumbent Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi. And yes, I have been practicing the pronunciation. I'm certainly looking forward to hearing your views on the yen carry trade, Alison, and what it means for high yield investments in a number of jurisdictions. In the meantime, we're getting ready, aren't we, for our Planet Normal events? Tuesday, the 24th of February, less than 2 weeks to go. Roll up, roll up.
Indeed. Yes, indeed. I think you're pushing your luck a bit this week, mate. I know what Japan is.
I'm abroad, I'm jet lagged. What can I say? I'm in a hotel room.
I've seen the Mikado and Lost in Translation. I know what these things are.
We used to watch Tenko when we were kids. Tenko.
I'm not sure that's the reference we want now, is it really? Tenko. Yes, indeed. We are absolutely looking forward to Tuesday 24th when we'll be having our Planet Normal live event at the Emmanuel Centre. And I know you and I, Liam, having read Lionel Schreiber's excellent new book on satire and immigration, Lionel's really pushing it this time. So there's going to be lots of fireworks. And who better to help Lionel talk about the challenges of immigration than Suella Braverman, new Reform MP, who spent quite a lot of her time in the Conservative Party trying to persuade other cabinet ministers that controlling immigration might be a nice idea. So we're very much looking forward to that. And I have to say, I know it's been an absolutely dire January with the weather and so on, and everyone probably thinks like me, I don't really want to go out, but please come and join us because we'll have a drink and it will be a really, really cheering up evening. Don't you think, Halligan?
It's going to be great fun. You and I are going to be reaching new highs of mutual mocking and self-loathing. We'll be ripping it out of each other, won't we? In our friendly way, we'll be discussing politics, economics, obviously, and I think this really is a pivotal moment for our country and for the world.
Completely.
And I must say, joking aside, I do really enjoy chatting with you every week, and I know a lot of our listeners and now viewers enjoy it. But what better guests could we have at the moment than the absolutely brilliant Lionel Shriver? She's an iconic author with a properly deserved global reputation. Her new book, A Better Life, is about to be published. We're lucky enough to have review copies, aren't we? And Suella Braverman, who's somebody we both admire. We know Suella to be a warm, very thoughtful, very bright individual. She's defected from the Tories to Reform. She takes a lot of blows from the broadcast media. She's often character assassinated but she's a really, really thoughtful and courageous person with an awful lot to contribute, I would say, to the public life of this country. And this will be her first major outing as a Reform MP. We're delighted to have her with us there. She'll be there up on stage on Tuesday, February the 24th. So do come and see us if you can. I know the event's in London. We'll do some events soon, fingers crossed. Outside of London, we're both very keen to. We want to come to Wales in particular, don't we,
We do.
Alison? You're in the woods, and we'll be absolutely at the heart of the elections in early May. So yeah, please do come and support us. Come and meet us. We love hearing from Planet Normal listeners. We think you're an amazing crowd of people, and come and meet each other. Do come to the Emmanuel Centre in Westminster on Tuesday, February the 24th. So weird background, Alison. I'm in a hotel room in Amman. I'm here doing some reporting, some journalism. It's 20 miles from Iran, across the Strait of Hormuz, the major energy choke point of the world. Maybe we can the gateways to the Persian Gulf. Maybe we can talk about that a bit later. But I think we should start, shouldn't we, with I mean, Ambrose is absolute howitzer of a piece. He is an iconic columnist. I think second only to you on the paper. I think the two of you really are enormous voices in British public life. And he's written a scorcher this week, hasn't he?
He really has, and I think it's actually quite interesting that both, I mean, Ambrose, myself, and Philip Johnston,
Another huge Telegraph voice. Yeah.
huge are we. You know, I was thinking this morning actually. I mean, we always feel proud, don't we, to work for the Telegraph? But reading some of the commentary this morning, I thought we've got, you know, I mean, I'm quite a junior partner really compared to Phil and Ambrose.
You the tea boy.
Tea boy, no, tea lady. That's Angela Rayner, love. And she's going to be the Prime Minister, so we're going to be well up, aren't we? Oh my God. The standards of karaoke in number 10 are going to go through the roof.
That's wrong on so many levels, but carry on.
It's not even close to the abomination that's coming, mate, I tell you. Yeah, so I think that as you quoted at the top, I mean, Ambrose, Phil, and I have been writing today about y- you know, this astonishing moment of clearly the Mandelson scandal has unleashed all this turbulence in the government. We've seen Starmer's lost Morgan McSweeney, Chief of Staff, Tim Allen, the Head of Communications, has gone, the Cabinet Secretary's gone, Kemi Badenoch had another cracking outing at Prime Minister's Questions earlier, where she basically accused the Prime Minister of running a Downing Street boys club and of packing the government with paedophile sympathisers. It was hard to disagree with that. And I guess the question that lots of us are asking, really, I mean, I've written a question here on my Planet Normal listeners don't get to see my post-it notes very much, but they form a key part of the Pearson Arsenal.
I hope you're putting them in the archive so they all can be lodged at your Cambridge College when you fall off.
I've got ask Liam, better the useless bastard prime minister you know, question mark. So I think that is our theme for the week, isn't it, really? Do we stick with this puddingy, soulless, absolutely horrendously useless prime minister, or looking at the potential lined up successors, do we think that Keir might be bad, but he's not the worst, is he, Liam?
It's a bit like the bar scene from Star Wars, you know. It's just a, you know, I do know these people personally, and I'm not. This isn't just gratuitous insults, but the reality is that I'm afraid the Labour Party, and we need, you know, proper opposition in this party. We need a proper Labour Party that can form governments that don't just collapse in on themselves in factional infighting and economic literacy. We had that under Tony Blair, for better or for worse. But I'm afraid this Labour government is taking us back to the future. It's taking us back to the 70s, not just in terms of, you know, possible financial crisis. It's also taking us back to the 70s, to a time when the public as a whole didn't trust Labour to govern. And that's not to say that, before anyone gets tribal, it's not to say that the Tories didn't make a huge mess of it, um, as well, because of course they did. The Tories left office with government debt close to 100% of GDP and taxation at a 70-year high. The so-called austerity years, there were some controls on public spending, but overall the national debt went up 2.5 times. And this is what Ambrose is talking about. Ambrose is, to be serious for a moment, an extremely sophisticated writer, not just about politics, but about finance in particular. He's very financially savvy. He has a big reputation in financial markets for saying some things that seem way out there, and they are. But when he nails it, he really nails it. He's a very important voice in this country, and for him to write such an impassioned column as he has, and that's why I quoted it directly, Alison, along with you and Phil Johnson. But it really is a moment where Britain it's starting to look as if it is ungovernable. And I talk to a lot of people on international markets. I'm here in Oman, in my part of my life as somebody who consults and talks to people in financial markets, and that, I'm the Brit in the room, and people are saying to me, "What is going on? What are you
Mm.
guys playing at?" We're now paying more for our government debt, as I said, than not just all the rest of the G7, but many other minor countries with a very thin record with respect to them of governance over the last years, decades, and even centuries, as we have. The phrase "it's as good as gold" came from the fact that British government bonds that they sold around the world literally had gold gilt edges. That's why they're called gilts. We had an unsurpassed reputation for financial probity. That went south in the 70s, of course, when we went cap in hand to the International Monetary Fund. But since then, successive Conservative and then New Labour governments made a decent fist of it. They got back our reputation for financial probity, but it really does take decades. And we are now on the cusp of losing that trust as serious institutional investors around the world, the pension funds, the insurance companies, the sovereign wealth funds, governments from around the world investing in those government gilts, those treasury bills that the UK government issues, if you like. They are pushing up that price, and they're pushing up the price we must pay to borrow, because they're looking at the British government and they're thinking, crikey, Keir Starmer's one thing. He's got Rachel Reeves. She's pretty uninspiring, but at least she understands the basics of financial, management and fiscal policy, even though she's been massively buffeted by the Labour left. Starmer and Reeves tried to get some kind of welfare reform, some kind of slowdown in the rate of growth of spending through Parliament last summer, as we've talked about endlessly on Planet Normal, Alison. The Labour left, the backbenchers, the activists said, no, 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 that's not going to happen. We just need to borrow and spend, borrow and spend, borrow and spend. It's now at the point where Starmer is on borrowed time. Whoever replaces him is absolutely going to be to the left of him, even Wes Streeting, because he would have to do the same Faustian pact with the Labour backbenchers and the Labour activists in order to stay in power. So the markets can only see more borrowing and more spending. And it's such a shame, because there are signs, Alison, the retail sales figures, some other surveys, there are signs that the British economy is fighting back. It's trying to grow. It's trying to get going. Entrepreneurs are trying to get the economy moving, but they keep getting stitched up by the shower which passes for political leadership in this country at this time. And I say all that with a lot of regret, because it does not need to be this way.
But even when Starmer was, strong, right? He just won this, he actually gave an incredibly delusional, arrogant speech to the Parliamentary Labour Party. I will never walk away from the mandate I was given to change this country. I will fight as long as I have breath in my body. Wasn't your mandate, matey. won a landslide because the Conservative voters were so angry with the Conservative Party and so disgusted that they either stayed at home or they voted reform. So, as we've often talked about, Liam, his mandate is remarkably shallow. But I think if you think that even when they'd won this over, more than 400 seats, undeservedly, in my view, he wasn't an inspiring leader, but people thought it'll be an end to years of Tory chaos. Even when he was strong, he and Rachel from accounts couldn't get even very, very, pathetic reforms through. And now, really, he's a hostage of the left of his party, I would say. Planet Normal listeners may know I'm a big fan of the Mad Max films. That's my wilder side.
You love a bit of Mel, don't you?
I do. I like. Yeah.
You love an Aussie in a leather jacket.
I like a Lozzie in a leather gilet, and but when they with their captives, they put them on the front of those crazy vehicles, don't they? And they take them into battle. That, if you can imagine, Keir Starmer in a
Mhm.
pair of underpants and a leather gilet, crucified on the front of an Australian jalopy. That is what we're talking about. So it's going to be interesting. So he really is being kept in place now while the others, I guess, muster their campaign teams. Angela Rayner, we know, has to sort out her stamp duty difficulty with HMRC. We saw the coup that never was, didn't we, Liam? We had Anas Sarwar, the Scottish Labour leader, coming out to say that Starmer had to go. Dear old Anas was obviously hoping there was going to be a stampede of people coming in behind him. There was a deathly silence. All the cabinet ministers tweeted obediently saying Starmer's great and he's got to stay. But essentially now, as you say, he's very much there, probably on borrowed time. But Wes Streeting had to, because of his association with Mandelson, someone he says he didn't know very well, although he signed off all his emails to Peter with kisses and was arranging holidays with him, which I don't think you usually go on holiday with people you don't know, do you? But anyway, called him a legend. So Streeting had to issue some of the emails between him and Mandelson to try and clear the path for him. So that may have damaged him. But essentially, Starmer now is in place on the front of the Australian runaway tractor, because we've got the Gorton and Denton by-election coming up. And you said earlier, I thought it was interesting, you said, that Labour, we always need a Labour Party, a strong Labour Party to keep the Tories sort of vaguely honest and vice versa. I think all that now is about to change. The two-party system will be dead after May the 7th, because what we're going to see in Gorton and Denton, I think, is we're going to see it's probably going to come down. The Labour has a 13,000 majority, but that could easily be swept away. So we've got a strong Muslim vote in Gorton, I think, and the Muslim vote party has told their supporters to vote Green. So I think what we're going to be seeing from May the 7th across the country, it's no longer going to be Tory versus Labour. I think we're going to see more and more of the far left and the muscular right, which is the Greens versus Reform. And I think that's going to be a pattern now. I think the Tories and Labour are going to be hardly in it in many, many by-elections. So Starmer will be there to cushion the disgrace of losing this 13,000 majority, almost certainly. And then on May the 8th, he will have to face the fact that Labour will almost certainly be kicked out of its fiefdom of Wales, an astonishing, historic rejection and humiliation. So he'll be there to take those blows, and then it'll depend, as we've said, the caliber of people lining up. Might be just interesting, actually, just a little tiny bit before I hand back to you, of Philip Johnston, and he says, when Harold Wilson resigned unexpectedly as Prime Minister in 1976, there were 6 candidates: James Callaghan, Tony Benn, Michael Foot, Dennis Healey, Roy Jenkins, and Anthony Crossland. He says what is apparent is how formidable a group they were. Callaghan was Foreign Secretary, he'd been Chancellor and Home Secretary, the only Prime Minister to hold all 4 great offices of state. Healey was Chancellor, obviously very distinguished wartime record. Jenkins, another formidable intellect, Home Secretary. Ben, a bit bonkers, but brilliant in his own way. Energy Secretary, Foot Employment Secretary, very, very literary, clever man. And Anthony Crossland, devious but brilliant Environment Secretary. They were united by lengthy experience and by having served their country in the Second World War. So now we look at the choice to replace Starmer. So I guess the question is, Liam, is, you know, if you were Kemi Badenoch or Nigel Farage, would you want Starmer to stay in place? Because there's a lot of reasons to want him to stay there, because he's not going to be able to do anything very much. And it might suit them very well to have him stay. And I don't think Kemi called for him to go today, because actually having a sprightly new Wes Streeting opposite her, or even, God forbid, Angela with did you see her new Barbie means business blow dry?
Don't come to me for sartorial comment. I mean,
No, anyway, trust me. When a woman means business, she gets a new haircut. But anyway, so yes, I mean, what do you think? I mean, do you think it would suit them to keep Starmer there, really?
I mean, you here we are in base politics, but you're right, because this is how a lot of these people think. I hate to say this, but I can't see Britain doing what it needs to do in terms of getting our public finances under control, unless there is, some kind of what people in finance euphemistically call a correction. I think there's going to have to be, and I hate to say this, of course I do, and I say it with huge caution, but the only way you're going to get these clowns to actually focus on the fact that Britain cannot afford to keep spending and borrowing the way it is if the bond market gives it a proper slap. And I hope it's not. I hope it's a slap that makes our head spin rather than a slap that knocks us out. Um, and people on the left will accuse me of trying to incite some kind of crisis. I could have said that, any time over the last 3 years, given how closely I watch financial markets and public finances. But it's now getting to the point where these pressures are bursting out into the open, and they're going to become part of mainstream politics. And you and I joke about gilt yields and all the rest of it, but the very fact that you, Alison Pearson, are a very, a very, you don't usually write about finance and business with huge respect, right? And economics. And yet you have become totally steeped in this stuff because you can see now how important it is. And that's the phase that we're coming into. And it may well be that as we approach the edge of some kind of, let's hope it's not a cliff, let's hope it's just a step that we can trip over rather than plunge to some kind of long-term damage. As we approach that, it may well be that the opposition parties want Labour in there to be in charge when it's all happening. Then they can come in and act as the great saviours. Is reform ready for government? We know that serious people like Danny Kruger, like Zia Youssef, like Nigel Farage himself, Richard Tice, we know these people are literally working around the clock to come up with policies, get measures in place, drafting legislation. But this party barely existed just a handful of years ago. Are they ready to take over? Could them taking over lead to even more chaos because they're unprepared? And so it may be that they want a pause. They want Labour to stay and stew in its own juices, and for the party to really see how ungovernable this party is and how impossible it is to countenance the idea of them winning an election again when they would absolutely get slaughtered in the next one.
I've actually had it suggested to me by someone very senior that Reform wouldn't really want to win Wales. And now you might say, why is that? But you see, if they win Wales, I think they're going to give Plaid Cymru a really good battle.
Yeah.
But if they win Wales, then they've got a country to run.
Yeah.
And it's in a terrible mess.
Yeah.
The NHS Wales is the worst in the United Kingdom
Yeah.
by a long measure. There's huge problems in Wales. So suddenly you've got reform at the helm, and then people can extrapolate from anything they do in Wales to elsewhere. So then they can say,
Yeah.
oh, you're going to be that kind of a government.
Yeah.
Do you see?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think actually they probably would, it would suit Nigel better to do well, to do
Yeah.
really well under this proportional representation system without actually taking control. I just wanted to say something, Liam, about this Starmer thing, because it was something this week that actually made me shout at the television. And you know how mild mannered I am. You know, I'm very, very, it's
That's
there's
unthinkable.
unthinkable, it's very rarely that I'm not, that I get upset or hysterical, as one listener called me. Very rarely. But Starmer was to save his sorry backside, was suddenly extending huge sympathy to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. And, few of us can imagine the dreadful trauma you've all experienced. And, I am sorry. I am sorry that powerful people didn't come to your rescue. I am sorry. Well, he's never been sorry, has he, to the tens of thousands of white British working class girls who had been put through what some might say, not that you want to compare suffering, but had been put through absolutely monstrous ordeals. And as we speak, there is an independent rape gangs inquiry going on in London, organised by Rupert Lowe, MP, and by the amazing Sammy Woodhouse, a survivor herself. And they have been uh, hearing testimony from survivors, which honestly, people, it cracks your brain it melts your brain to understand that these acts went on in our country, and indeed in some areas continue. And the Prime Minister, who has not wanted a rape inquiry because it would damage his electoral prospects, because so many of the rape gang members were of Pakistani origin. And J.K. Rowling, on whom we can now rely, Liam, for some pretty pithy put downs, said on X this week, Starmer is indifferent to harm done to girls and women unless it threatens his career.
Mm.
Boom.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Did you manage? What's the situation with journalists getting into the rape gang inquiry, Alison? I know you were making inquiries about that.
Well, actually, I was going to say between us and the Planet Normal listeners, I was actually invited to be on that panel. And for various personal reasons, I was unable to take part, to commit to that time. But you know how strongly I feel about it, and how I've
Yeah.
gone to great lengths, to offer my support. And indeed, I can now say to Planet Normal listeners, I'll be talking a lot more about this in the weeks to come, but with a group of women, very fantastic women. We are so concerned now about the illegal migrant situation. Almost every week, everyone will have noticed another case this week of a Afghan migrant recently arrived, living in a house of multiple occupancy, who raped a 12-year-old girl he spotted in a playground. And the only reason he was caught, Liam, was because he was using the charge card given to him by the British state to buy his groceries and so on. And he bought her a drink. He bought her a fizzy drink in a grocery store after he'd raped her multiple times. So that was thoughtful. So that's happening every week. And what a group of us are going to do, and I hope we'll be able to involve a lot of Planet Normal listeners. We're going to have a protest in Kent, near the sea, where these guys are coming ashore. We're going to have a rapist not welcome protest, and I'm hoping that's going to be quite a sort of a great symbolic moment. But coming back to your question, Liam, I wanted to go to this rape gangs inquiry. They were saying, Sammy said, no media present. Now, I'm not quite sure. I think that was out of respect and sensitivity towards the women, some of whom were having, obviously, to testify to horrible, horrible things. But I think it's been a bit of a shame. And I think people have felt there's been no proper coverage of it. But certainly it's a great stain on our nation, probably one of the greatest, certainly in our lifetime. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting the next few weeks. I mean, what would you if you had to go to your betting markets? When do they say Starmer will go? End of the year?
Well, it's not so much the timing; it's just the probability that he's not, that he will be replaced as prime minister, and that he's now odds on to lose his job before the end of the parliament. So, better than evens. So, probability of more than 50%. He was 2 to 1 on, and he was 3 to 1 on. Looking at sort of 60, 70, 75% probability, according to the weight of money in the markets, that he's going to go. And that is what is really spooking financial markets. And talking about financial markets, just before we come to our Planet Normal guest, we should probably just mention what happened in Japan. I wrote about it in my Sunday Telegraph column at the weekend, link in the show notes to the episode. After Sanae Takaichi won an incredible victory. So she's not just Japan's first lead female prime minister. She turned around a proper fiscal financial crisis. She's with the LDP, which is the Liberal Democrat Party of Japan, which is more of a counterintuitively are the labels we use. The sort of centre right party it's ruled Japan for most of the last 70 years, but it was in a very poor state last autumn when she took over. Had 4 leaders in 5 years, all kinds of slush fund scandals and so on, and a new kind of party in Japan that was protesting against immigration was coming up on the inside and challenging them. Well, Takaichi, she's built a big social media presence. She's got a really good personality. A lot of young people like her. She's a drummer. There was a fantastic piece of film where she was drumming alongside one South Korea's leader, and she's a really good drummer.
Is
Like a
she?
heavy metal drummer. Absolutely, yeah, she's really
Mm.
good.
Oh,
I think,
amazing.
yeah, and her political hero isn't just Shinzo Abe, who was her mentor, the Japanese prime minister, who after he left office in 2022 was tragically assassinated, of course. Her hero or her heroine is Margaret Thatcher, and she styled herself as the Iron Lady. And as I quote last Sunday, she says, "I want to be an Iron Lady," and in some senses she is. She's very hawkish, very pro-defense. That's why Trump likes her. She's been, throwing rhetorical darts at President Xi of China. Japan used to run Taiwan, of course. So there's not a lot of love lost between China and Japan on many issues. And she's been very pointed in her remarks about China. So and she's taking on the party that's been protesting against immigration. So lots of sort of centre right instincts, if you like. But the point I was making is that when it comes to fiscal policy, again, to come back to that, tax and spend, she wants to do a massive, massive fiscal expansion. Japan already has national debt up at 100, 230% of GDP, massive, much bigger than ours. But a lot of that debt Japan kind of owes to itself because that debt's been bought by its own massive pension funds and insurance companies and so on. A lot of our debt disproportionately is held overseas by, we don't know who really, but a lot of speculative investors rather than pension funds, which is why there's such concern about UK debt in financial markets. The concern is that as she spends more money, Japanese bond yields will go up more. There'll be a proper fiscal crisis in Japan. But as she gets the economy going, if she does get the economy going and those interest rates go up, then the yen will go up. The yen is very, 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 very undervalued. Over a 30-year cycle, it's been falling. It's lost about 2/3 of its value. And as the yen goes up, Alison, the danger is that an awful lot of people around the world, when Japan had ultra low interest rates, borrowed in yen, used those yen loans, those yen denominated loans to buy AI stocks in America, to buy stocks in London on the FTSE 100, to buy high yielding assets like UK government gilts and others. And as the yen goes up, and it's up to 1-2% since she was re-elected on Sunday, those yen loans become a lot more expensive to repay in yen because the currency you have to convert your currency from if you've borrowed abroad into yen, you need more of your currency to buy the yen that you need to pay back your yen denominated loans. So the danger is this is what's called the yen carry trade, and it's absolutely massive um, point of conversation on financial markets at the moment. Will the yen carry trade unwind? If it unwinds, what that means is lots of people around the world will sell lots of assets that they borrowed yen to buy, including stocks and shares in the Western world and government bonds in the Western world. A lot of them will sell those assets quickly to get yen to pay back their yen loans, which are rapidly becoming more expensive to pay back because the yen is going up. It's a long-winded explanation, but I challenge anybody to explain it in a shorter way. So there is concern that Japan's massive fiscal expansion, which Takaichi was elected to do, and she's got the kind of savvy, the political savvy, and the kind of affection among the public, they will follow her. It's whatever it does for Japan, it could cause absolute chaos on financial markets around the world because Japan is such a massive creditor to the world. The government has got lots of debt, but the country as a whole, the banks, the pension funds, the insurance companies are massive creditors to the world. So this is a big issue, and it may be that for now the yen carry trade sounds like, what is that bloke going on about? What kind of inane, obscure concepts are these? But it could well be very much what people are talking about if it unwinds and it causes shockwaves across the world.
Can I ask you a quick fire question for people who, unlike us, aren't leading economists? If we have, if Angela Rayner did depose Starmer and Miliband, God help us, Mr. Windmills of your mind. If they became the Prime Minister and Chancellor of the Exchequer, could the bond markets force a general election? And just very quickly, what would that mechanism look like?
Well, that's the great imponderable. I've been saying this literally since before Starmer won the general election. I was writing that this could happen, not to go on about it, but way before July 2024. And I was called mad for my trouble by lots of other journalists and people at the top of the British financial establishment. Um, uh, the precise mechanism is difficult to identify, but let's just think this through, right? If there is a major crisis and the Labour Party um, is in absolute meltdown, then a lot of those backbenchers, they're not going to want to be in government. They're not going to want to be in government. A lot of these people don't like being in, they think they like their party being in office, but when it comes down to it, they're temperamentally, they are protest people.
Yeah, yeah.
And the one danger is that there could be a vote of no confidence, which the Tories and Reform and everyone else, the nationalist parties, the Welsh and Scottish parties get together and they challenge Starmer, and it will just become impossible for him to carry on. It'll be politically impossible for him to carry on. And if he's then replaced and the financial rot continues, gets even worse if the likes of Rayner came in, I mean, the Labour Party will just have to call an election because its brand will be so damaged. There will be worldwide clamour for these people to get out of the way. You'll literally have, Trump, other global leaders saying, no, 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 we need, because other countries around the world will be worried that UK bond market imploding is going to cause some kind of, domino effect. Um, uh, and you're not going to be able to hide behind Erskine May, the sort of hallowed book of parliamentary rules. However much Angela Rayner spent on her blow dry, it's not going to be enough to counter, global opinion saying, get out, you're in the name of God, go. We need someone who can add up. There'd literally be some kind of emergency government. I mean, look, I really don't. It's very difficult to say things that could happen without sounding alarmist, but let me muster just a tiny little bit of legitimacy by pointing out that I've been saying that this will happen for a couple of years, right?
Mm.
Let me muster that. And what could happen if it gets so bad? And we've seen this, we saw the IMF take over Greece. We saw the IMF take over Ireland. We saw the IMF take over Spain, Italy. Italy's in the top 10 world economies, If that happens to us, are you telling me it's not going to be a general election? Now, back in February 2024, Sophie Windsor, the celebrated actress who played Big Suze in the hit TV series Peep Show, joined us on Planet Normal. She argued that kids under 16 shouldn't be allowed internet and social media enabled smartphones, and the teaching in schools should be based not on screens but on books and writing. A niche view at the time, Sophie's argument's now gone mainstream, as she's used not just her intelligence and her passion as a mum of two, but also her profile as the wife of the King's cousins Freddie Windsor. She's a member of the royal family herself. She's used all those things to campaign for more traditional learning and for kids to be protected from digital overload. We were delighted to welcome Sophie Windsor back on the rocket to get an update. Sophie Windsor, great to have you back here on Planet Normal. It was February 2024 when you first climbed aboard the rocket of right thinking and spoke about your campaign for pretty much the first time publicly. Tell us what's happened. Where are we now when it comes to your efforts to get a ban on social media for under 16s, much less use of screens in schools, kids not having smartphones?
Well, first of all, thank you, because your endorsement all those years ago, after my first Spectator piece saying, why the hell are there so many screens in schools? You then having me on a couple of months later really gave me an amazing platform to start howling from. So I'm very, very grateful. The smartphone and social media conversation has come on leaps and bounds very, very quickly. It's very exciting that it's now a national conversation and in the papers pretty much every day. It's no surprise. They're obviously disastrous for children. And the Online Safety Act was so well meant and could have been so brilliant, but it is completely impossible to keep up with this tech. And children are so much more digitally literate than we all are. I think sadly something much more robust and muscular needs to happen. I think the conversation about harmful material is a tiny bit one-sided, because I think harmless material is but it's harmful in a different way. If children are just watching dance videos, prank videos, animal videos for hours and hours and hours, and they are very funny and tempting and dopamine giving on TikTok, that's a complete waste of their lives. That's total junk. So it's not just the beheadings and the disgusting porn and the violence that's a problem. It's also the sort of leisure activities of literally being in your bed, bent over, watching videos for hours at a time. That I'm very happy that conversation is being had. I'm not sure what the government are going to do with it. The House of Lords have been brilliant on it. Who knows? Consultation is a word that fills me with slight dread, because it just seems to be a very long-winded way of, addressing something that's very urgent. The screens in schools situation is a battle which hasn't been waged properly, let alone won. And I have been a slight lone voice on this for quite a while now. Children are glued to sort of platforms for their learning, rather than looking at their teachers' faces and handwriting in books and using one trusty textbook. And that sounds very Luddite. It's not. It works so much better. How education is now for teenagers, they have tons of different platforms, links, bite-sized videos. Some of their notes will be in OneNote. Another one will be a teacher's video. It's insanity. It's so frenetic. It's so flimsy. They're on a machine which they already equate with leisure, a sort of internet-enabled device for learning. I don't know about you. I wouldn't have done 14 minutes work on a machine that gave me access to the entire world. No way. So I think we're already setting them up to fail if we're not giving them a quiet sanctuary of books and a teacher.
Let's just spool back, Sophie. You're obviously a mum of two. yourself. You know, you're an actor. You're a member of the royal family. What got you into this? Why were you so driven back in late 2023, early 2024 to
It was
talk
actually
about this?
earlier than that. Well, first of all, I was lucky enough to be made patron of a brilliant education charity. So I saw a ton of schools around the country. I met wonderful teachers. I met with the teenagers. And I could see that children who would otherwise maybe have a chance if they knuckled down and did some work, they were being, this is back to social media, their life chances were being destroyed by being up all night on addictive platforms. The teachers were in despair, saying, I've got some really bright pupils in this class, and they are exhausted. They're falling asleep in my classes. They're eating total junk to try and stay awake. And then they're going back to their drug. In fact, sometimes they're on their drug in class. There's nothing I can do. It's 35 children. This is a catastrophe. So I sort of went to the coalface and saw what was happening. I also saw, from a personal point of view, my children not learning a single thing in lockdown. Teachers tried their best. They tried to put education online, and it was a joke. I mean, and I'm not alone in thinking this. Most parents around the country thought, wow, can't wait till we go back to the classroom. And then we went back to the classroom and children stayed on screens. So obviously a huge investment had been made into this ed tech world. And we couldn't go back to books and teachers because too much money had been spent. And a lot of us are gradually seeing the teacher relegated from, is a great phrase, from sage on the stage to guide on the side. They're wandering around classrooms like centurions, making the children sure the children are staying on task. What a rubbish vocation that is. Teachers go into it for the most noble reasons in society. They want to
They should,
light
yeah.
a candle in children to learn something and lift themselves up and be elevated by a subject. And now they're just making sure they're not on YouTube. What are we doing? I'm so cross.
Tell us about what's been happening internationally. Obviously, we had big news in Australia recently. Where does Britain stand in terms of the kind of continuum of reform in this area?
I mean, listen, we're doing okay in that our Online Safety Act was, you know, it was a lot of work. It was well meant. A lot of very clever people worked on it. And then we realized that Ofcom didn't really have the powers and the funding to enforce everything that was drawn up in that. So it was clear that something much tougher had to happen. It's much cheaper to go tough. Just say they can't have smartphones and they can't be on social media till after their GCSEs. I think we're heading that way. I think our government have got quite a lot of other things going on. I'm sad there's going to be a consultation. I just think go for it. Put it on the social media companies. I do understand a lot of your readers' concerns about, we don't want to be digitally supervised, all of us. That's not okay. But to be honest, we are being anyway. All of us are living our lives online. All these companies know everything about us. It won't change anything. They know pretty much to the month when you and I were born, simply from what we look up, how we express ourselves, who we, get information from. So it wouldn't change anything. They know how old their users are. So you put it onto the big tech companies saying, this is on you, pal. If we find that this 15-year-old has been going onto this, you get a mega fine. And money talks. They get scared of serious fines. So that's what Australia are doing. There's mixed reports from Australia. I mean, the teachers I've spoken to through my now amazingly global network of educators are saying the impact is stunning. That the children are concentrating more, they're playing more. They all say it's like they've gone back about 5 years. They're sweet, funny children again, rather than angst-riddled, angry nutters. They're actually learning more. I mean, the effects have been stunning. But then other people, I don't know if they've got a vested interest, I don't know, are saying children are finding their way around it. Okay, but that is always going to happen. If the majority shifts and parents and schools can say, sorry, it's illegal, and the majority of children are safer, that can only be a good thing.
How have parents reacted to your campaign?
I don't know, Liam. I think Britain has changed a little bit. And I think maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago, people were a bit braver. And I think COVID has changed something in people in that they're much more nervous. I don't know if it's come from the sort of curtain twitching paranoia that people got about people seeing them going out maybe and having more people around that. I don't know. I'm getting more support from sort of people like you, who just say, yeah, come on and talk about this. You know, there are grassroots groups who are doing brilliant work, gathering parents around the country together, but then they've got safety in numbers, and it's very, very clever. Um, I don't know. I'm going to keep going on about it because I don't like the fact that children are throwing away their life chances, and we're letting these companies let them do that.
But parents know, many parents know about, the rows that phones cause when so and so in my class has got this flashy smartphone and I haven't, says some 9-year-old. And, you know, kids complain they can't have their phones in their bedroom, endless rows about how much screen time you're allowed to have. I imagine a lot of parents will be on your side, but I imagine there's also some who, basically rely on the fact that their kids are hooked on their screens.
You're right. These wretched devices are a source of huge friction in the family home, and relationships that were once lovely are now sort of boiled down to get off that thing. No, it's so boring and so frustrating. This is a slight diversion, sorry. What's appalling is that parents who are very tough on smartphones and social media, their children are now coming home with iPads and Chromebooks that the schools have issued them or got the parents to buy for their work. And so children are doing their homework online, getting quite stimulated because the screen itself is a stimulator. Then they're going off task, obviously, they're children. They're doing the games that are offered after the homework. Then they're doing God knows what online, when if they were just using books, this wouldn't be a problem. So I think schools being complicit in this, screenization of children is just awful. I can see where they got excited about it. These companies are incredibly persuasive, and they made it seem like this was a cutting edge way to take education. But it wasn't. And we have to, find our British courage and say, we made a mistake. Here's all the clinical evidence. And it's staggering, Liam. There's a book called The Digital Delusion by now colleague of mine, a neuroscientist. And he explains how you learn from looking at your teacher's face, from handwriting your thoughts, from having the physical page in your hand from a book. It's spatial, you're learning something and it's there on the page. If you're on a screen, what you're learning now is in the same place as what you learned 5 minutes, 30 minutes ago, yesterday. It's so shallow, nothing sticks. I don't know. I don't know which route to fight the hardest. There's the physical harms of being of children being on a screen for too long. It's bad for their eyesight. It gives them headaches. It disrupts their hormones. It delays their sleep. It's bad for their spinal formation. Do we go down that route to say, sorry, bring back books? Or do we go for the learning angle, which is equally persuasive? AI in the classroom is a whole nother ball game, which we might not have time for today. I have strong views about that as well. I just wish all our education, the people who make the decisions weren't so bedazzled by these salesmen. Just very quickly, there was a ed tech fair in London recently, and I got sent loads of videos from sort of my plants who were there. And it reeked of a sort of capitalist fervour, which is fine, but it's a business, Liam. This is all about billions of pounds and dollars. It's not about education. It's shiny and it's stimulating, it's agitating. It's in the main pretty flimsy stuff. And it's a lot of it's short-circuiting the hard stuff children have to do to properly learn things. AI especially does that. And I just think we have to press pause and have the courage to really look at this.
I mean, the vested interests are enormous. Education budgets across the Western world are often, 2 or 3 times defense budgets. They're huge. And the big tech and the hardware manufacturers, the tech companies, as you say, they want their slice of that action, don't they? Really bolted into education spending forever and a day. There are big vested. You work in the entertainment business. You're an actor of some experience and repute and fair play to you. So you know about how the entertainment business work, how the tech companies who dominate the entertainment business, how powerful and rapacious they can be. They are a really big vested interest, and they're going to want to stop this, aren't they?
Well, yeah, but I think we have to, like in acting, where so much is done with CGI and sort of, AI extras. And now a lot of my friends who just do voiceovers, their work's been cut because it's now all, it's robots or whatever they're called, AI generated voices. We've got to prioritize humanity, Liam. So all these chatbot tutors that are being given to our poorest children, this is the latest thing of our education secretary. I don't understand why that money's not being funneled into human beings,
Mm.
because some of these children are terribly vulnerable, and the teacher or the teaching assistant is the only trusted adult in their life. And they need the pastoral care and watchful eye of a, kind human being way more than they need a chatbot tutor. So I think it's the case in something as simple as a supermarket where there's a, automated checkout. That's terribly cruel to lonely old people whose only conversation of the week is with the checkout person when they're getting their milk. What are we doing? Why isn't there an ethical responsibility built into all these huge companies to employ human beings, both for the employers and the people who need them? There needs to be a moral compass put into this digital world that we're now hurtling towards.
For those of us who haven't got school age kids anymore, Sophie, just update us on what's happening on not relating to your children, of course, but what you're seeing as education patron as you are, what you're seeing in schools in terms of the use of AI, how far it's going, the extent to which kids are using it, the extent to which university students are using it, frankly, and what you think should happen on that front.
Well, again, a lot of schools are getting very turned on by the idea of AI in the classroom, and again, they think it makes them look terribly futuristic and on trend. And hearing a lot of these schools talk, and I've done it quite a lot now, talking about how they are designing their own special AI tutor to really sort of, it's personalized. They use all these silly words about how the tutor is going to be putting the pupils through their paces and really upping their game. And they're going to talk at the same time to the pupils about using these chatbot tutors ethically and responsibly and diligently. And then they're not the kind of children who are going to just get this chatbot tutor to do everything for them. And I thought, have you ever met a teenager? Of course they're going to get the sodding tutor to do everything for them, because that's what normal teenagers do. Maybe you get the occasional outlier who'll go, no, I'm actually going to make...
Write my essay myself.
Well, exactly. But
rather than just
really,
asking AI to do it for me.
no, most of them won't. Why are you putting them in this dangerous situation? And many of them will fall. I mean, teenagers are biologically wired to push boundaries, pull the wool over our eyes, rebel. That they should do that, but we shouldn't put them in a position where that's going to compromise their education. And I think AI really at its most basic is a wonderful PA. It can create anything you want pretty much from scratch, or it can, assimilate gigabytes of information, put it in a good order, make sense of it, feed it back to you. And it's basically like feeding teenagers puree instead of making them chop up things and chew it and actually go through the slightly hard work of actually digesting information. And I don't think this kind of short circuitry is doing them any favours in the educational sphere. And I've always said I'm a proponent of technology education. You can be taught all this stuff in IT lessons. It can't contaminate every other subject, because when it's bleeding into English and history and philosophy, you've got to do that heavy lifting first. An adult can use it if they want. I'm afraid I disapprove of it in adults as well. Just bloody do the thinking and do it yourself. maybe in healthcare and stuff. Of course, it's got its place. Um, children, I think it has to be, I always say tech ed, not ed tech.
Sophie Winkleman, thanks as ever for appearing on Planet Normal.
Thanks for having me.
So there you go, Alison. Sophie Windsor, as she's now called, known as Sophie Winkleman, of course, as an actress. She's launched a really impassioned campaign. I know at the time, I'm not disclosing anything untoward. She was nervous about doing so a couple of years ago. She wrote about her thoughts in The Spectator, as she said in the interview, gave us an interview on Planet Normal. The Telegraph put it on the front of the paper, along with others, not least Molly Kingsley, another friend of Planet Normal. They've really led the charge. We've now got a ban on social media for under 16-year-olds in Australia. You've got a lot of people in Parliament talking about it. The government's talking about doing that. I think you support that cause as well, don't you?
I absolutely do. And Liam, I was thinking about it. I love listening to Sophie. I like her intelligence, but also her clear impatience and frustration. It's something that it's horrible, really. It's really damaging what's going on. I think this will be looked back on as one of the most important and most disastrous things of our time. I really do think in a century, people will say they did what to children. And I was remembering, Liam, that when my kids were in their teens, I think it was my daughter, rather angrily said to me about social media and phones. She said, "Your generation basically put us in a room, threw in a few hand grenades, and said, 'There you go, play with those.'" And I kind of didn't really get it. And I think one of the problems that Sophie was pointing to really is that my generation, to some extent yours, you're that much younger than me, is that we were what they call digital immigrants, and our kids are digital natives. So we didn't really understand the impact. I mean, I would be constantly dragging my son off the Wii machine, whatever, but we didn't know. We didn't know how dangerous it was, or the addiction, and certainly things like what Sophie describes so eloquently, the pleasure of books. A few years ago, I was asked to be the chair of judges of a literary prize, which was taking place on an electronic reader. And in the end, I had to resign because I simply couldn't read the novels in that form. My attention to the words and the pages, and that sense you get, you're reading Lionel's novel at the moment, that nice sense you get of where am I in this book, being able to flick back.
Even you, and you have your literary, your love of literature, with huge respect to you, is the reason you are you.
But my reading focus has been badly diminished. The number of works of fiction I read in a year is right down. I used to probably read a novel a fortnight. I maybe read 5 a year now, but I am armored again. I've got long experience of being a reader. What chance does a child, particularly a child from a home without books, and libraries are closing and so on. And Sophie's so right. We now know that the physical looking at a page, the physical writing of words on a page imprints it on the brain much better than this sort of scanning thing. And something Sophie said that really struck me was it isn't just harmful content, even harmless content like, kittens or people falling off skis. It's just rotting your brain. It's you could be doing better stuff. And I say that as someone who considers themselves to be mildly addicted to social media at my age. But you could say, well, I've done my learning. I've read the metaphysical poets. I've read most of Charles Dickens and Jane Austen. What about the people who haven't, whose minds are poorly protected? against that. And if I could go back, I would be much, much more strict with my kids about access to those things. And I really support um, the ban on this, that no child in school should be learning on these things. Absolutely not. And I think people will look back as we look back on trepanning or lobotomies or bear baiting. It will be absolutely cause shock and horror. They'll say they left the kids with these devices, and I actually think as well that the trans cult has been spread amongst vulnerable children, some of whom are probably gay or bisexual, by social media, and their parents don't know that that's going on. So it's the first time in actually, I must tell you the story, Liam, quickly. Um, a friend in America said, "Oh, I've put parental controls on the three kids' devices. It's all fine." And she said a tech guy came to her house and she said, "Oh, it's great. I've got parental controls." And he said, "I'm sorry to tell you this, Mrs. Seltzer." He said, but your daughter has downloaded how to bypass parental controls and she's paid for it with your credit card." That's the world, Liam. It's very dangerous.
Now on to our listener emails, the messages that you send us at planetnormal@telegraph.co.uk. Please keep them coming. We love to hear from you, the citizens of Planet Normal.
Lots of listeners were very struck last week by our email from Dr. Claire, Planet Normal GP, who was talking about how difficult it is to get patients onto waiting lists, how appointments are cancelled. We know that people are counted as having been dealt with, treated, if they've just been knocked off the list, or even, Liam, you'll be delighted to know, if they've died. So that's the NHS for you. But so we've had lots of emails on the topic of the difficulty of the NHS. And this is one that struck me very strongly. This is from Steve. "Dear Alison, Liam, I'm writing because my recent experience with my mother's final days in hospital left me deeply shaken, not just by grief, but by what I witnessed in one of the NHS's most critical environments. My mother was 73, says Steve. She suffered a stroke and died from complications in the ICU. My mother was a fiercely independent woman who raised my sister and me alone after our father left when we were very young. She worked evenings to keep us afloat, even though in the 1980s claiming benefits might have left us no worse off financially. That option was unthinkable to her. A working class ethic was part of who she was. She never stopped working right up to the end, choosing to top up her small state and private pensions with part-time work so she could keep spoiling my sister and me, her 6 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren. I was fortunate, despite living hours away, to have the flexibility to drop everything and be with Mum every day in the ICU. On her first day there, while she could still speak, though slurred, we talked about family news and I could offer her small comforts. A kind South Asian nurse remarked, "Oh, you can understand her." That comment chilled me. While a couple of native English-speaking nurses had no difficulty understanding Mum, I was present for 2 of her 3 final days, during which no nurse on the shift spoke English as their first language. With visiting hours limited to just 5 hours a day, that meant that for the remaining 19 hours, my mother, already vulnerable and struggling to communicate, had no reliable way to make her needs understood by the team caring for her. The clinical care was good, I've no complaints there, but the communication challenges were impossible to ignore. I watched multiple attempts, sometimes almost comical, sometimes frustrating, for simple requests to be understood between staff. An Eastern European nurse asking something of an African colleague, who then tried to relay it to a South Asian colleague. In a high-stakes, high-tech ICU, where split-second clarity can matter, this felt precarious, says Steve. Among the doctors I met, the clearest English came from a talented young doctor from the Middle East. I did not encounter a single British-born doctor during my time with Mum in the ICU. This experience left me asking hard questions. Have British trained and British born doctors and nurses become a minority in ICUs? Is what I saw an outlier or increasingly common? My mother, a lifelong taxpayer who never asked for handouts, spent some of the most vulnerable hours of her life unable to be reliably understood by those caring for her. I thank God I could have been there. I thank God I could be there to hold her hand and to speak for her while she could still communicate. I also saw dozens of elderly patients on trolleys lining the corridors, many unaccompanied, waiting hours for A&E assessment or a bed. At the time, I was too consumed by worry and grief to fully process it. In hindsight, the sight of that level of indignity for people at their most frail is heartbreaking. The nurses I met were mainly hardworking and tried their best. Some even used to try local phrases to put people at ease. Yet other moments grated an overly bureaucratic African desk clerk who, despite recognizing me, still needed permission from the sister before I could return to my mother's side after a toilet break. The Indian doctor who delivered the terminal prognosis in an unnecessarily blunt and abrupt manner. None of this was about race, says Steve. It was about language barriers that made already frightening and intimate moments harder, and about a system that sometimes leaves people feeling like strangers in the very health service they've spent a lifetime funding. I know that some will hear this email and assume prejudice. I want to be very clear. I have no issue with people from any background caring for my mother. Many do so with great skill and compassion. My concern is in critical care settings, especially clear and fluent communication is not a nice to have. It is essential for safety, dignity, and reassurance. My wonderful, funny, selfless mother has gone. Being with her until almost the very end will, in time, be a source of comfort. Right now, though, I feel we as a society have failed her and others like her in preventable ways. I believe we urgently need much greater investment in training and retaining homegrown doctors and nurses. Without that, more families will face the same quiet distress I felt watching someone they love struggling to be heard when they most need to be understood. Yours sincerely, Steve.
Gosh, that's a very, very powerful email, Alison. I want to read out an email from Ronnie. Ronnie is responding to General Sir Peter Wall from couple of weeks ago,
Yes.
and the question of British servicemen and women who are then put through the courts multiple times for incidents that were alleged to have happened um, in a military context, in a live war situation. Dear Alison and Liam, thank you for your wonderful weekly dose of sanity in an ever maddening world. After listening to the interview with General Sir Peter Wall, who of course was head of the British Army, I found the following verse on my desk, which appears to be an unpublished sixth verse to Rudyard Kipling's Tommy. I've done my time, served with pride, got a family as well, but smooth, sharp-suited lawyers make my life a merry hell. The foreign foes faced long ago, seen off in a fearful fight, now demand what we did then is seen in a different light. Let's answer this and answer that, and Tommy go to court. But it's just you follow orders when there's danger to be fought. There's danger to be fought. The danger's in the court. And where are those who sent us when Tommy goes to court? Best wishes, Ronnie. Ronnie is a retired colonel in the British Army.
Aren't we blessed, Liam, and our fantastic listeners? Honestly, we just are so blessed. We learn so much look at those, from Ronnie and Steve. Thank you very much. On a slightly lighter note, This is disgusted. Alan from darkest Shropshire. Dear Planet Normal, says Alan, I was outraged to an Allison level of incandescence.
Surely not. There's two of you. You're gonna have to up your game, Alison. There's people out there more outraged than you.
That's what they're doing in Iran, Liam, trying to create a nuclear bomb. It's Pearson and Allen in a nuclear bunker. I mean that could spark nuclear war. Anyway, so Alan says he was outraged by the Mandelson undies pic. I was hair-raisingly shocked that Mandy might be wearing Y fronts. I have always eschewed boxers and shorts, etc. But to share my go-to fashion pants style with Mandelson is more than I could stomach. Still, I take a crumb of comfort that Peter might be wearing a posing pouch. Yours, Alan. Well, I don't. My knowledge of gentlemen's underwear is lacking, but I'm sure you're right. Alan. And it's interesting. This is from David. Another Planet Normal tour de force from Sir Richard Dearlove and your good selves. I do hope Lucy Connolly sues the bastards for railroading her case through the courts. And what of Alison's case against the incompetent woke Starpo? Following Tom's email last episode regarding the alleged melanin-challenged English countryside, surely Whitehall should look a little closer to home and start by decolonizing its own nomenclature. That's not easy to say, decolonizing its own nomenclature to something more appropriate. A number of alternatives present themselves. Keep on rocking the free world, says David.
And finally, Alison, when it comes to Whitehall, we've got a fabulous email from Bob the Bard. He's struck again, and he's sung. He's come up with a poem that he wants us to sing.
No, you sing this one because it's more your style. I can't do. You do it.
Right, to be sung to the tune of "Streets of London." Now, of course, "Streets of London" is a brilliant song by the English singer-songwriter Ralph McTell, who I actually met a few weeks ago, and I watched him sing this song at the Irish Cultural Centre in Hammersmith, which is a brilliant place full of great music and performance. Ralph McTell isn't Irish, but he met lots of Irish builders when he was working on the building sites as a student, and he wrote a song called "From Clare to Here," from Clare in the west of Ireland to here, riffing on a phrase that a builder told him: "It's a long way from Clare to here." Of course, lots of Irish emigration to work in construction in this country, and Ralph McTell is actually, he's very well known in the UK, but he's an absolute superstar in Ireland. He's hugely followed in Ireland, and his song "The Streets of London" is one of the finest, I think, if you like, modern folk songs. And Bob wants us to take a look at "The Streets of Whitehall" to be sung to the tune of "The Streets of London." So we'll end on this. Dear Planet Normal writes, Bob, you often talk about how the blob likes to undermine our democracy by getting rid of politicians that it doesn't like, such as Liz Truss. I'm therefore convinced that even if Nigel Farage were to win, he would still face bitter opposition from activist civil servants in the streets of Whitehall. Thanks again for Planet Normal, the podcast that's streets ahead of all the others. Regards, Bob, not his real name.
Former mug winner.
So, have you seen the lady who used to be Prime Minister, warning us about the blob that treated her so ill? Blair and all his henchmen destroyed the Constitution, allowing the courts and quangos to thwart the public will. So how can you tell me that the Sir Humphreys do what they're told and the system's fine? Let me take you by the hand and lead you through the streets of Whitehall. I'll show you something, change your mind. Have you seen the man they say could be our next Prime Minister, telling us how he will save our country from decline? Even if he wins the vote and gets in with a landslide, the blob will do its utmost to force him to resign. So how can you tell me that the Sir Humphreys, I'm earning my money today, do what they're told, that the system's fine? Let me take you by the hand and lead you through the streets of Whitehall. I'll show you something that'll make you change your mind. I love
Oh,
that bombshell.
bravo.
That's it from for another week as we leave our sanctuary of sweet reason. Our flying rescue for reason cues. Email of the week. Alison.
2. No, we've got to do 2. So I'm going to insist. Obviously, one for Steve because of his wonderful account of spending his time with his mother in the ICU. Fantastic. I really agree with you, Steve, about we absolutely have to have doctors and nurses who speak good English, so elderly people aren't frightened that they have surrounded by people who don't understand them. And Ronnie, Colonel Ronnie. So special dispensation this week from the generous Pearson, who's a bit less parsimonious than economist Halligan. So please,
mug inflation, mug quantitative easing.
Well, it's it's a Labour government. It's mug inflation. Mug inflation is basically Rachel Reeves, isn't it? Really.
But if you increase the supply of mug, anyway, it doesn't matter. Please send us an email with mug winner in the subject heading to the Planet Normal address and put your postal address in those emails. Steve and Ronnie will do that mug.
And just one more reminder about this fantastic event on Tuesday, the 24th of February at the Emmanuel Centre in central London, featuring me, co-pilot Halligan, who may or may not sing. I'll probably ask him to bring a guitar. You never know when he might burst into song. And we'll be speaking exclusively to the brilliant Lionel Shriver. This is the first interview Lionel will be giving about her fantastic new novel, A Better Life. And also, of course, Suella Braverman, Reform's newest MP. And of course, co-pilot Halligan is going to be outnumbered 3-1 by not shy or retiring women. So that's going to be quite a challenge for him, I think.
My natural role, and details of how you can buy the tickets in the links to the show notes in this episode, and also at telegraph.co.uk/Planet Normal. And if you enjoyed this episode of Planet Normal, do subscribe, leave us a review and rating wherever you can. Stay safe and in touch with us and with each other. Until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
If you're enjoying our journalism, why not sign up to From the Editor, our free email newsletter? Start your day with the latest news and opinion, plus our bite-sized puzzles. Scan the QR code to sign up free today.